What's up? Looks like we're live. Clint sent messages before I'm even live. How the hell does that work? Before I even hit the go live button, I'm getting messages. That's pretty cool. What's going on, brother? Did you have a good weekend? Yeah, we had a pretty good time down there in Clinton, Arkansas. It was a good time, nice festival, good people. Rained a little bit, kind of put a little bit of damper on the crowd. I think it did the same thing last year. But all in all, a good time and good music, and got to meet Ruby Lee, the yodeling cowgirl, and hang out with her for a little while. I think Damon interviewed her, and we sat there and got to listen to her sing in the town square and there at the festival. So it was pretty awesome. Yeah. What's going on? Carpenter. I'm going to call you Carpenter or Gardner. I don't know. Carpenter. What's up? You having pretty good? How about yourself? Hey, Georgiana. How are you? All right, let me get these links out. I won't be able to see your all's comments. Oh, and speaking of which, let me get those up here and let's see if we can get those sized wide and medium so everybody can see. Here's it big and wide better. Yeah, maybe that's better. Or is tall better? Is that, I think tall and big's better for y'all, or is that better? A, tall, or B, wide? I think tall is better. What do y'all think? What's going on, Curtis? So I can see y'all's response now. So somebody reply. What do y'all think looks better? The wide view like that or the tall view like that? I think you can see more comments this way, but they're a little more compacted. Tall like that? Okay. Yeah, we'll go tall and big font so everybody can kind of read it. But I'm really glad. Hopefully they'll be upgrading that a little bit more as well. Let's see what happens if I hit this button. Okay, that just enlarged the whole thing. Okay, I can't see my buttons now. All right. So Clint's going to talk to y'all and chat with y'all while I post the link. So let me get these links out. Yeah, let's make sure we get the right one. Well, that's loud. That's loud. Is my microphone seem louder than usual? Because that seemed really loud when I just did that. Very, very loud. Do I seem louder than usual? What's going on, Simon? I ain't seen you, my brother. Hope you're doing well. 6 months ago, absolutely, Simon. It's just wine, so yeah, it'll be fine. It's basically probably might be a little better actually. I age my some of my brandy mashes. I age them a little bit, and it helps build a little character. So absolutely, probably better than it would have been if you'd have done it fresh. And once you run it, once you get it jarred up or bottled up, let it sit for a few weeks, few months, and it'll get even better. So yeah. Yeah, even sometimes even with off taste, because some of mine that don't turn out well, some of my wines, if I have one that doesn't turn out real well, um, I'll run it. If because I'm not drinking it as a wine because it's not so good. So I'll just run it, and sometimes some of the ones that really weren't very good as a wine turn out pretty good as a brandy. So that's kind of weird how that works, but if it's straight water, we have to go back to the beginning of the process, Ethan, and find out what was the ABV of the mash, and did you actually get some good conversion, or did you get some good alcohol out of the original mash? A lot of times, if you don't have a hydrometer, it's hard to tell, and it may smell a little like alcohol and just be like a low beer even, and so um, A lot of times, Georgiana, you can run it twice. It's all dependent on your still setup to what, how you come off. 50% is 100 proof, so it's not bad. 50% is 100 proof, so definitely not the end of the world. But you can proof that down, uh, you know, to 60, 70, proof, not percent, 35%, and run it again and get a higher alcohol content. But 100 proof isn't bad. What's it taste like? Let me get these links out before we get too far into the rabbit hole, and I'll be right back with y'all. Take just a few minutes. I try not to do it too fast because Facebook thinks I'm a bot if I do it too fast, and they limit how many you can post because they think it's an automated post, and they they don't like those. They don't mind people posting manually, but if they think it's something that's automated, they try to limit it a little bit more than normal. I hope everybody had a good weekend. We had a great time down in Arkansas. I missed the pumpkin chunking though, man. I was busy working inside, working the table, and meeting and greeting and talking to all the people that were coming by, and didn't get a chance to do the pumpkin chunking. I saw Toby got to, and Ruby, and everybody over there doing it, and I didn't get to, so I'm kind of jelly. I've always thought that was cool as shit. They had a trebuchet. Seems a little laggy today. A little bit slower than usual. They said they're going to be working on my internet lines in the neighborhood. Maybe they're fixing some of this. I've had a little bit of lag as of late. And before we get started, I want to put some prayers out for Troy Halsey, who's in the hospital getting his heart checked this week. Hopefully everything's going to be all right with her brother. Hopefully he's doing well. And continue prayers for Virginia Crumb. Hopefully she heals well and speedily. If y'all have anybody else that you know that needs prayers, just go ahead and mention that in chat and we can all add them to our prayers. I knew it was going to cut me off that right there. Network. Oh, well. All right. Okay. All right, I'm back and I'm behind. So, all right, let's scroll up and let's see where I left off. Yeah, as far as a bad smell, a lot of times it's some of the acids. You know, there's a lot of organic acids like a butyric acid that smells like vomit that are created during the fermentation process, carpenter. So, um, lacto can give a, kind of a putrid smell as well. So, yeah, it's best to always wait until those smells go away, um, and then go ahead and distill after that. Yeah, yeah, stress yeast, whether it be, a high starting gravity or not enough nutrients or a high temperature, a low temperature. There's a lot of things that can create stress. And anytime you do create the stress, seems like those organic acids production increases, as does sometimes the sulfur smell. So sometimes that rotten egg smell can be also, excuse me, a product of a stressed fermentation. What's going on, Jim? Good to see you, brother. What's going on, Mash Brothers? Good to see y'all. Jungle fruit, they've come out 60%. Tastes real good. That's awesome. 120 is a really good proof to come off at. You've got a good amount of water in there, and that carries a lot of the flavors, plus a decent amount of alcohol. So 120, that's perfect. 120, 30 range. I mean, that's barrel proof. So a lot of people, if you can come off the tap at that, you don't even have to proof down. You can go straight into a barrel with that. So that's awesome. Yeah. The yeast bed at the bottom is fine. What I would do if you're going to be a while before you run it, you can rack it off that and separate that from the yeast bed, and it'll help preserve the flavors a little bit longer and won't but it's not all lost, but if you can in the future, what it's called a secondary fermentation with your wine, and maybe like after 3 weeks, a month, after most everything slows down and you see that bed formulating and it clears up real good, and not a lot of CO2 being put off, you can siphon it into another fermenter. And I use the airlocks on it always to keep the oxygen out of it. A lot of people don't say you don't need to, but oxidized wine doesn't taste good. It's just not good. And so to help preserve the wine and keep it from getting oxidated, it's good to have that airlock, um, especially if you're going to drink it as a wine. But even as a mash, it'll help. All copper is great if a lot of people can't really afford it, but all copper, never. Only negative thing I have about all copper is, well, two things: the cost and the maintenance. Other than that, it's the best. Um, but they found, Carpenter, that you can incorporate a copper mesh into the vapor path, and you can actually get as much exposure to the copper that way as you can just using a copper pot with copper plumbing. So, and if you have an adequate amount of mesh, I should say. So, if you have a 100-gallon pot, you're going to have to, of course, add more mesh than if you have a 10-gallon pot, right? So, but there's more surface area and you're forcing the vapor through that mesh. So, pretty much all that vapor is coming into contact with it. Whereas if it's just plumbing, a lot of times just like a 2-inch spool or copper line, only what's on the outside edge is going to come into contact with that. A lot of times it'll condense and reflux into its own, but you don't get as much exposure to that copper as you do forcing it through a mesh. Biggest issue using the mesh is making sure you get pure copper mesh and not copper plated steel. But if you can put that, in the lin arm or somewhere, where you can force it through. In mine, I've got, spools. I use the 2-inch, and I've got a little, it looks like the bathroom drain. It's got like, it's a gasket, tri-clamp gasket, and it's got little holes drilled in it, like a drain. And I put that in line, and I put the copper above that, so if it slips down, it's not going to drop down into my pot. So that works out pretty well. Oh, okay, okay. I thought you were just saying water. So that I have had that happen. People tell me. And what happened was they were doing grain, and they didn't get any conversion at all. They didn't get any conversion. They didn't use a hydrometer. So basically, and they didn't use sugar, they were just trying to do grain conversions, and they got no conversion. And basically, they were probably had a 1% mash, and basically everything that came off was just a nothing burger, and then they um, got a hydrometer, measured it, and found out that they had very little alcohol. Yeah. So using that hydrometer helps a lot. So jungle fruit, white corn, yellow corn with the red winter wheat. Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really good. I like using the wheat. And I always throw a few handful of oats in there with it. Kind of helps soften it up, and makes it a little bit more, I don't know, gives it a little better mouthfeel, creamy, kind of like similar to a lacto, but not. Um, but yeah, it helps a lot. Speaking of corn liquor, down in Arkansas, our buddy Toby was down there. I don't know if y'all know Toby or not. He brought some of his corn liquor. Man, I tell you what, that's about some of the best corn liquor I've had. He does a really good job on it. Damn good corn liquor. I was hoping to bring a jar of it home, and I guess I got really hammered Friday night, man. I got so hammered. Saturday, I felt awful all day there at the festival. I made my mistake. I'll never do that again. I'll do it Saturday night. I'll get hammered, but not the day before the festival. And I felt I was blue the whole day. And so that Saturday night, I was like, yeah, I have to pass on getting drunk tonight. And damn if they didn't drink the rest of that cold quartered corn liquor, Toby's. I was hoping to bring that home. I did sneak home with some money of his. Don't tell him. Yeah, if you have your malt, if the wheat's malted, it'll actually have probably a higher diastatic. Wheat generally has a higher diastatic power than even barley. So yeah, it definitely will. I always use the enzymes anyway. So if your wheat, which most often the winter wheat, if you just get it from the farmer like I do, it's not malted, but it's awesome. But you can malt it pretty easily. You know, it's easily malted in a bucket, and just got to stop the ferment. You got to stop the malting process at the right time, and then you got to let it dry out, and then you got to try to tumble it and get all those little roots off of it because those can be pretty bitter. Um, but it will take some of the sweet grassiness away from the wheat and give it a different flavor. I'm not going to say better because different people like different ways, but some people complain about wheat being too sweet and too grassy, and that'll definitely soften some of that up. But I always try to use some high temp alpha and some liquid glucose, even if I'm using malts, just so I'm sure that I get a good conversion. And the alpha, that high temp helps thin it down to where it's a lot more manageable and easier to stir and thin out. And I just like the way it works better. I do use less if I'm using malted grains, I may not use that 6-row anymore. I'll go with a 2-row that has a little more flavor and better flavor. And I can start doing, specialty malts, which don't have any diastatic at all, like the crystal malt or your dock malts or something like that. So, we can rely on the high temp and the high temp alpha amylase and the liquid glucose now to do a lot of those conversions. So we don't have to really do our, calculations. Do we have a high enough diastatic and all that? So definitely helps. But I will use less, right? So if I'm using malts, I will use less. I won't use full strength. What's going on, DJ? Doing great, brother. How about yourself? I know you said that 10, 13 minutes ago. I hope you're still with us. Thanks for stopping in, brother. Heads from the last run. That's the $1 million question. A lot of people will, and it's okay to do. One thing you want to stay away from is if you're doing brandies, you want to kind of tend to stay away from reusing heads. Uh, they can get concentrated if you keep saving them and putting them in the next one and save it and put them in the next one. They concentrate, right? So it's just not mixed heads with some, 4 shots, and we're talking mostly about 4 shots, not the actual heads. So the methanol, the things that you really don't want to concentrate heads, ethyl acetate and esters and all those, not as big a deal. Big hangover, not going to cause you to go blind to death. But if you keep concentrating 4 shots, then you kind of run into problems, and that there has been some deaths occur because stupidity. People rerunning those 4 shots and rerunning them and taking them out every time and putting them back in. And then all of a sudden they get greedy and they're like, let's just sell it all. It'll be fine, and a jar goes out with an extra high concentration of 4 shots or methanol, and somebody dies. I think in India, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, somewhere around there was a village, and they had a distiller in the village, and they lost maybe 5 or 6 people because of probably, I'm guessing, rerunning the heads like that or something to that effect. And it generally happens more when you have a larger setup and you have a lot more volume and you've got those 4 shots that everybody keeps coming off, and if it's like a gallon or two, and it just keeps concentrating. Even tails, they say, brandies, you should not really recycle your tails too often. Maybe one time would be good, because we found that there's methanol throughout the run in different concentrations. So you can also super concentrate 4 shots by rerunning those tails and then pulling that off, the next time. Then that's for people that mix the heads and the tails together and called an all faint. So yeah, when you're doing brandies, probably shouldn't keep the heads, 4 shots especially. I don't personally, I'm not, if I was a big, huge distillery and I had 1,000-gallon tank and I was looking at 100 gallons of heads that what didn't have the 4 shots in it, right? So just heads, and I knew there was a lot of alcohol in there, and I had a bottom shelf liquor, maybe, you start thinking economically and trying to make every penny count, because it's some of the margins, some of these distilleries not as quite high as you think. I just saw today there was another distillery here in Kentucky filing for Chapter 11. So not a great time for distilleries right now. They're finding out that a lot of the younger people are drinking less bourbon and a lot of other things. So, but for me, I don't tend to keep the high heads that are closest to the 4 shots. Now, the mid to low heads, the low heads especially, it depends on what you're doing. If you're going to be aging this for several years in a barrel, you'll actually want some of those low heads in there, because the esters in those low heads will combine with some of the oils and acids in your tails and estrify and create some good flavors. So you'll want to keep your high tails and your low heads along with your hearts when you're aging for long term, and those mature just like in a wine. Wine's kind of harsh when it's fresh, but after it ages 6 months to a year, it those harsh flavors go away, and you start getting into some mature, rich, flavors, and that's esterification of acids and oils, and esters. So it really depends on what you're going to do with it. I generally don't keep a lot of heads, though, because I don't want to separate them. And let me show the image. Most of y'all have seen this before, but for those that haven't, let me show this chart that most people have seen 1,000 times. And again, I'll say don't pay attention to the temperatures at the top, but if you look over at the heads, like in jar number 1, the 4 shots that are red probably should be a little bit more in that jar, but in jar 2, 3, 4, all the way across, there should be less and less and less red. And actually, like in jar 20, maybe just 2 red dots, because there is some in there, but just not a lot. But if you look at jar 2, 3, and 4, there's just not a lot of ethanol in there. Now, maybe 5 and 6, you could add with your tails to get that ethanol out of there. But jars 2, 3, and 4, it's just not worth it, because that acetone and the ethyl acetate that is in jars 2 and 3, especially, it's just not worth trying to get that flavor out again. So I always pitch those. Now, when we talk about low heads, we're talking about jars 6 and 7 that you will want to keep if you're barrel aging, along with probably 15, 16, and maybe 17 if you're barrel aging for a long period of time, because those will tend to balance out and make some interesting flavors. It's a good question. Yeah, you can. I generally let it run its course, and just let it do its thing, especially if you have a butyric acid. If it smells like vomit, don't run it smell like vomit, because it'll come out tasting not so good. I've learned that from experience. But yeah, just let it do its thing and be patient. That's one of the biggest thing in distilling is you have to have a lot of patience, just like winemaking. It's you know 5% preparation, 5% operation, and 90% wait. So yeah, pH, good point. Yeah, I failed to mention that. Um, and we can help the pH, and prevent that. We talk about using the oyster shells, and that's it's a great way to do it. I've seen some in pickling lime. Probably best to use the calcium carbonate. I've seen people, thinking, saying the calcium hydroxide works better, but if you're in the middle of a fermentation and your pH gets down into the low threes and high twos, you're definitely going to have to bring up the pH somehow. So it's too late to add your oyster shells at that point in time because they're a buffer. So your best thing is to use calcium, some pickling lime, which is calcium hydroxide. But when you do that, your yeast wants to go back. You super oxygenate it. The hydroxide super oxidates the mash again, creates a lot of bubbles, kind of like a sodium bicarbonate will. But the sodium, it's not good because it's a salt, and that stresses your yeast. But if that's all you have, the sodium is going to be less stress on the yeast than a 2 point something pH. So definitely use it. But if you have pickling lime, it's going to be a little bit better and less stress, but it will cause your yeast to go into reproduction again. So when they get into an oxygen-rich environment, they want to reproduce. So I guess they get oxygen drunk and reproduce. So that's what happens, and that's one of the reasons we really don't want to stir our mashes or musks or washes up after the first day. So we want it to get anaerobic, because the less oxygen in there is less risk for bacterial buildup as well, because the bacteria requires oxygen. And that's why a lot of people use airlocks and try to fill those carboys up to the top. That's why they have small caps and come up to a small top, less oxygen exposure. And you definitely don't want your wine getting oxidized, but getting all the oxygen out helps reduce the chance of a bacterial load. Yeah, I try to always air. Now, I will say, Jim, if you're doing a corn mash or a grain mash, and the ambient temperatures are in the 80s, and there's not going to be any temperature issues, and you're going to be worked off in 4 days, putting a towel over it with the loose lid or something like that, just to keep, you know, the critters out and the bugs out and whatever, keep animals from getting into it. Nothing like a dead possum in your mash. But um, yeah, it's fine to do that, because really you don't have enough time, and oxidation isn't a concern, within just 4 or 5 days. But anytime you're doing a wine or a brandy, I think you should airlock. But that's just a preference. It still works without it, and you can still produce brandy without it. Some people say it's just as good as. Most with the proper palate would say, it's been oxidized and it's not as good, especially when it's a wine. But brandies, probably going to be a lot harder to tell, but still, I like to keep mine covered, and because I secondary ferment for a long period of time, and when you do that, you don't want acetobacter's getting in there off the fruit flies, right? These fruit flies bring it in, and they bring in that acetobacter bacteria, and it starts to grow, and next thing you know, 3 6 months down the road, you start get vinegar production. Yeah, skimming it off too, saving it. You can put it in the refrigerator and save it, but don't reintroduce it to your next mash until it's, and if you do get lacto, be sure to sterilize everything really, really well, because you don't want lacto taking hold of your fermentation early, because then it's competing with the alcohol for sugars, and also can, it's going to cause your, ABV to drop and production to drop, and it's best to get that later on. Now, I have seen people that do it early intentionally, and then they back sweeten it after it takes its toll. I don't know what prevents it from coming back on, if they, pasteurize it and then maybe, back sweeten or whatever. I've never, thought that was a very good idea. Sounds like a lot of work for nothing. But I think it'd be best to kind of clean everything up, get it sterilized, and then, when your ABV, if you start out 1080 and 1020 or 10015 or something, then introduce it, and it can, eat up the last bits of sugar and make it dry, and then it'll go away because it won't have anything to eat, and it'll won't take so long. But yeah, it's a good idea to let any off smell um, take its course, unless of course it's a vinegar, and then if it's kind of start to smell vinegary, run it as soon as you can, because that won't get any better. That just gets worse. Yeah, definitely been some issues with that as well. You definitely don't want to puke into your mash, because it will get coated, and but that's only if you distill on the grain. Chances are really the foam and the vapors. But some people, if you're putting copper mesh coming out of your infuser, or if you're distilling on the grain, yeah, it could be a big problem. And so in your thumper, when you're coming out of your thumper with, infused materials, it could get stuck there as well. Yeah, yeah, I'd say it's going to be fine for sure. Yeah, I mean, if you'll know if it's off, and it's safe to taste it a little bit. It's not, maybe not off the surface. Maybe kind of drop a little glass in and take a little drink. It's just a wine. Yeah, yeah, and SG, when you measure with a hydrometer, it can't determine whether those sugars are fermentable or not. So it's just telling you that you have sugars present. So without an iodine test, you can say, "Oh, I got a great conversion. I got 1080 or 1075. Man, that's the best conversion ever. It's awesome." But if it's, if the glue code didn't work or something, happened, there's a lot of different things, I guess, that could go wrong, especially in doing like I don't know, maybe with molasses and things, you tend to, but you may not have a great conversion. And the hydrometer doesn't read fermentable sugars, it just reads sugars. So you could have a lot of limited dextrins in there that aren't fermentable. And that 1070 or 1075 may actually be at 1040 or 1035 alcohol wise, that can convert, and the rest is just unconvertible sugars that didn't get converted. So an iodine test will tell you if those were all converted properly or not. All right, 20 kilograms. How many pounds? I'm not too. You're gonna make me Google. 44 pounds. Well, that's little on the pricey side, but that's not bad. Over here, we probably, I'd say about 25 kilograms. About 50 is anywhere from 6 to 12, depending on where you get it. And of course, if it's heirloom, you may be getting some heirloom corn or something. Yeah, buddy Tom Crum, he had one in his barn that he'd forgotten all about. It sat there for almost a year. He's busy doing other things and forgot all about it. He's like, "Oh my God, I forgot I had that over there." And he's like, man, I don't know whether it'd be any good or not, but let's find out. And it is just fine. Actually, I think he said it was one of his better ones as well. So yeah, as long as you don't get, you know, if you cook everything and get everything to a high temperature when you make it, and you don't have a lot of bacteria and issues, should be fine. Right. Yeah. Doing the both with the amylase and the malts is definitely the way to go. And now we can use that good 2 row instead of having to pay out the yazoo for some 6 row that doesn't have as much flavor. So that's awesome. Yeah. And I used to use the powder, man, and the powder is just it's just not as good. I love the new liquid. The liquid stuff is great. Yeah, I use it to clean metal that gets welded. I use it to clean glass countertops, the glass top stove. I keep a little thing here next to me to keep my glasses, for my eyeglasses, to keep those clean. Kill weeds, it's great for killing weeds. So many uses from it. Lots and lots of uses. Maybe we'll try to sit here and brainstorm one day and come up with a list of how many uses we can find for heads, and fours. Yeah, it does. They are. They definitely are. And that definitely happened in India. And I'm pretty sure that they kept rerunning heads, rerunning heads, rerunning heads, and just until I guess it became a dominant feature in the whole run. It just got to a certain percentage that it just, yeah, killed several people. I think 4 or 5, maybe more. It's been a while. Burn test is the reason we did the burn test, Simon, and a lot of people don't realize this. Ethanol, a lot of people think it's for lead, and other people will think it does help you, proof wise, because only alcohol above a certain proof will ignite at room temperature. As you heat it up, it's less and less. So as the warmer the alcohol gets, the less proof it takes to ignite, down to a point. But back in the old days, a lot of people said, "Oh, we did the burn to test for lead." No, not true. Lead burns pale white, and you really can't see it in a blue flame at all. The yellow streaks that we were looking for and that we saw were from iron and metal. And it was, a lot of times, if they were run in iron drums or steel drums, oil drums with cast iron, the old radiators that used to be the steam radiators that used to be in people's houses and stuff. Those were a popular condenser, and it was cast iron and not good. And so the oil drums and the car radiators and the steam radiators, were found to be really bad for you. There's metal ions that were coming off in there, and probably mercury and lots of iron oxide and other things in there that aren't good for you as well. So they would burn it, and if it burned with a lot of yellow, then the chances are that it had some of the iron in there, because iron would burn yellow. It was like a sodium, so it's a yellowish red. So that was the original reason why we burned shine way back in the day. So it's not about lead, it's not about heads or fours, because methanol and ethanol burn the same color blue. But it will tell you at the proof at room temperature, it will give you some indication of whether your alcohol has been watered down. So out in the old west, when you're going to a saloon or something, they may, light it up to see how much the bartender's been watering the liquor down, right? So I'm sure that was probably done for sure. Antifreeze, there you go. Might not be good on some rubber parts, so make sure you don't have rubber, parts in those wipers. I guess what do they use in there? Probably an ethylene glycol base or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, I think what we're talking about, Carpenter, is probably had larger steels, um, but reconcentrating. I think what happens is, so for example, you've got a quart of heads that you're taking off, on a 40-gallon steel, and it's 50 milliliters per gallon, whatever. So that ends up being X amount. So let's just say a quart, and then you got that, and then you dump that back into the next one. So you not only have that quart that you would normally pull off in that next run of mash, but you've got an additional quart that you just dumped in on it, right? So now you have 2 quarts of heads in there. And now when you pull them off and you do proper cuts, you're pulling off 2 or 3 quarts or concentrated quarts. And so you're saving those and you put those in the next, run. And now you've gotten 3 or 4 in where you'd normally just have one coming off. So they can concentrate on you. Now, it's not a big risk if you do things properly, but I think if you keep continuing save and run, it kind of snowballs on you, and it just keeps building up until it becomes a dominant thing in your mash, because your mash is like 10%, 12% alcohol, right? ABV. So, and you start dumping in 160 proof heads, that's going to be the predominant amount of alcohol that's coming off, and it's just overwhelming the system. And if you don't make proper cuts, and you're an idiot, and you don't really know what you're doing, and you're an idiot, and you're greedy, and you don't care about the people, and you just don't have, the knowledge, then you accidentally kill some people, and that's what happened. But yeah, if you don't, I just don't save them. Period. It's just not worth it, and they don't taste good, and it's just hard to get them out the next time. So, especially like jar 1 through 3 or 4, like I showed on the chart, it's just not worth it. It's not even small scale. Just just no. But a lot of people, they do. Oh, it's just a stripping run. I'll get it the next time. Why wait? Why do it? Why put it back in there only to have to take it back out again? Just take it out, leave it out, and the next time you won't have, on the next run, subsequent run, you won't have as much to take out, and it'll be a cleaner liquor. Trust me, I know that definitely helps. So for me, anyway, yeah, I'm definitely pulling them. Definitely pulling them because I just don't like that flavor. I don't like acetone. Fingernail polish remover, so you can put a little perfume in your heads and give it to your gal as a fingernail polish remover, or if you like to use fingernail, you paint your fingernails, maybe, I don't know. I'm not judging anybody. Yeah, the lead it burns actually white, and it's pale white, and it's really hard to see in a blue flame. So the reddish orange is the iron, and that's generally what you're looking for. Than what we did in the past. Absolutely. And yeah, that's one of the reasons that we do, have those. And there's a lot of specialty malts out there that their enzymes are denatured from the chocolate malting process, the smoking and the crystal malt process, crystallization. There's a lot of processes that they treat these malts with that denature the enzymes in them, and adds great flavor, but yeah, they just don't have any productive enzymes anymore. So absolutely. And yeah, good point, Clint. Look at your temperatures. Don't just listen to what I say or Clint says, because I've discovered that different amylase in like high temp alpha, some have you even added 155, some do 185, or just alpha, I should say, liquid alpha. Some are high temp and go at 185. Some are similar to a powder but used at 155. Same with glucose. My broken bones is 140 140 or less, which 135 is what I put it in, and that's usually what I put in some of my malts and stuff, and some of it's 100. So you have to read your labels and go with what it says on the label. Yeah, yeah, you definitely want to wait until you get well into your fermentation process to introduce the lacto. Nope, it'll burn white. No, the red actually is, and it was. There were a lot of people getting toxicity from the metal ions and a lot of the metals and heavy metals that were in the shine from a lot of these, old cast iron things that had a lot of raw, chemicals in it, probably mercury and probably lead. Um, I'm sure lots of different metals were getting leached out of that, and radiators, old radiators, and people didn't care. I mean, shoot. Let me see. I'm getting close to being caught up, so I like showing these every once in a while. This is what moonshine stills looked like back in the day. This has been, you can see the axe hole in the side that the feds did, but you can see all the drums in the background. They not only mashed them, this was like a submarine pot of today. They welded this together and made them a big long pot with a cap coming off of it. And these were once oil drums. And yeah, that wasn't good. And they would run those into car radiators or house steam radiators, and people didn't know about it. That's back when we had leaded solder that we were soldering our pipes up with. Nobody knew, but yeah. Is it isopropyl? I wasn't sure. Good to know. But yeah, that's a lot of that. Let's see. I think I've got some more. Let's see. Here we go. Yep. There's, Thumper. Look at that nice plastic PVC, that black plastic PVC coming out of there. Boy, that's nice. But that had also been smashed by a revenue man. But yeah, isn't that nice? See if I got another file or two here. Even some old cast iron. Look at that. They blew that one up instead of they couldn't split it with their axe. It was too thick, so they just put a little stick of dynamite in there. Nice galvanized pipe coming off there too, huh? Yeah, that's the good old moonshine everybody tells you about. That's so much better than what we have today, right? Yeah, boy. I don't think so. And that was very typical back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, 50s and 60s. Actually, that's about when people started getting a little bit more knowledgeable, especially in the 70s when they became much more knowledgeable about leads and toxins and stuff, for sure. Yes, man. I love me some Coke Zero. I tell you what, I had some just regular Coke off, sugar, and I had this Coke Zero, and I was like, well, let's try them both. So I did the side by side taste test, and I'm telling you, the Zero is better. So, and Ann's got diabetes, so that's all she can have anyway. So I'm not gonna have sugary drinks in there and let her sit there. Oh, I wish I could have that. And so we just drink the sugar free. It's better for me anyway. And the cherry Coke Zero is real good too. But I think I just like the regular Coke Zero, man. It's the bomb. Yeah. Yeah, I mean they're good for a lot of things. You can anesthetic, you can clean wounds with it. Lots and lots of things you can do. Start your grill, charcoal lighter fluid is much better than the shit you put on there. Much cleaner than the lighter fluid that you put on there. I mean, you might as well just use freaking gasoline compared to forks and heads. It's much cleaner to ignite your charcoal and burn your charcoal with forks and heads than charcoal lighter fluid. Basically, because that stuff you can always tell it. When you get the match slice versus the kind, you can always tell the people that get crazy with it and just pour the half the damn container on there. But yeah, it's really good for charcoal lighter fluid. What's going on, Mr. KP? How you doing, my brother? Hope you're doing well, my friend. Yeah, I think it's about time. I thought Mark was gonna call it when I seen he's in here, but he let me down. He let me down, Mark. Oh, depend on you, brother. Oh hell, that's I'm sorry. I'm not gonna show you what's in that jar. It's not legal in my state yet. We good here. We bloody butcher sour mash number 4 select. If I remember correctly, it's about 145 proof. Whew, yeah. What's going on, Colt? Doing good, brother. How about you, man? Good seeing you here. Yeah, I smelled that a little bit. That was about 140, 45 when I got it. But it's I've had it for a few months, and I can definitely tell a difference. So jar aging works too. And I was talking about that esterification process. It doesn't just do that in barrels. It'll do it in a jar too. Kills ants. Mm-hmm. What's going on, potato? Just bought a Vever 13.2. It's your first still. Is there anything I need to watch out for with stainless steel? And it being my first try. First mash, my recommendation probably be definitely a sugar shine. I always recommend that for everybody, and it's the easiest. But it's the cheapest. So if you mess up, you just add a little bit of sugar and yeast and a little bit of nutrients, and make sure that you put the oyster shells that we talk about. So yeah, just 2 pounds of sugar for every gallon of water. Make sure you get, they talk about the oyster shells, get you some cheesecloth and boil you up some of those oyster shells that you get from the feed supply store, and reuse them. You can reuse them, rinse them and reuse them. So, it a little bit of expense initially, but they last forever. They last a long time, and you can use them in gardening and stuff too. But I hear you. Uh-oh. Well, just what I do, they say it will double the effect of the meds. So you just take half the meds and drink, right? And that's how it works. No, I'm just kidding you, brother. There's some medications you can't drink with other than just like pain meds or something that might make you sick. So, but back to this, yeah, I would do like 2 pounds of sugar to a gallon of water. And then if you've got some diammonium phosphate or some nutrients to add to that, you can. If you don't, get you a box of Wheaties or bran flakes and grind them up and throw a few handfuls in there with it to feed the yeast a little bit. And then you can put your little, the oyster shells, pouch oyster shells and cheesecloth, just roll them up, tighten a knot, throw them in there, and it'll help pH crash, because sugar washes tend to crash really quickly and hard, and it's tough for beginners, because we recommend it for beginners because it's an inexpensive mash, but it's also not the easiest mash to run because the pH tends to crash on it. So we can eliminate that by adding, a little pouch of those, or a few handfuls of those boiled up oyster shells. Clean them up a little bit, boil them, make sure there's no, critters or any of that in there, and clean them out real good. They say they're sterilized, but I like doing that myself. And then rinse them out, and then just put them in the little cheesecloth pouch tied up, and just throw it in there at the same time you pitch the yeast, and you'll be fine. And then you can kind of get familiar with how it bubbles up, and the time. It should happen pretty quickly for you as well. And you can run it through the steel, and look for any kind of leaks. So if there's any leaks or any issues like that, don't over tighten your gaskets. Now, is this the football type steel, or is this the 3-pot? Let me see. Does it look like? Let's see. Let's see. Does it look like this potato? Does it have the football cap on it, or is it a 3-pot? Go on, Mr. Slacks. Great Slacks Bowl. 3-pot? Okay. Well, first and foremost, do not over tighten those gaskets. Don't under tighten them, because you might get vapor leaks. But if you over tighten them, they'll split every time. So be careful about over tightening them. The condenser on it is going to be a real headache. It's going to be very problematic. It's horrible for beginners. And the thumper is not a beginner thing either. So you're starting out. You're going to be learning the hard way, right? You're not riding the bike with the training wheels, man. We've thrown the training wheels off when you come out with a thumper, which is more an advanced thing, and a super small condenser, undersized. I mean, you jump straight onto a moped, man. We're moving fast. But yeah, just be sure that you don't over tighten them, and that's something that you're going to want to improve as you can, as you can afford to. If you can afford to, I would just go ahead and start that way. Replacing some of your lines, and definitely replacing the condenser on it with a larger copper coil going into a 5-gallon bucket or something like that. Definitely, because it's really hard to keep that little pot that sits right on top of the steel that's normally hot in a hot place anyway. Trying to keep it cool properly is it's an ongoing problem. With a 5 or 10-gallon, it's not as bad, but with a 13 or an 18, you've got to do it longer, so it becomes a little bit more of an issue. So trying to keep that cool is going to be a troubling. One thing you can do is get you some of these get you these water bottles like this, and open them up, and take water out to about right there, about that far down. That way, when it freezes, it'll have room to expand. It just won't split the sides of this. And then you can set it right down in the middle of that copper coil, frozen, and and help keep it cool, and that'll work. So have maybe half a dozen of these, and just put them in there, and help keep things cool, because that's really the biggest problem with 3-pots that the Weber has, is an undersized worm and flake. So that the pot doesn't hold enough liquid, and it gets too hot too quick. So having a larger flake, or condenser container, it's called a flake, will help a lot. But it's a work in progress. You can use it as is. It's just going to be more difficult. So as time passes, you can buy you a coil of copper, a 10-foot coil, and 1/2 inch, and put it in a bucket, and maybe get some wood, 3 or 4 pieces of wood, and drill holes in it, and each wood about an inch lower than the next. That way your coil can go down and down and down in this wood and keep it separated. Or you can just tie it to something just the same, but keeps it separated, and it'll help, but drill a hole in the bucket. You can get you a little bulkhead fitting, and solder your copper to that at the bottom, going through your plastic bucket, and make a pretty good little, worm or you can just get you a shotgun condenser and use that instead. Those work pretty well. Or Liebig. I prefer a shotgun. Worms are the best. Shotgun's probably second, and then Liebig's probably the third. But definitely want to improve on that condenser. But it's a good little starting still for what you got in them. 13-gallon pots, a perfect, a great size pot. You can get, you can make it. It's worth your while. So the people that get the fives, they're inexpensive, but it's a lot of work for a little bit. So with your 13, you're going to run 10 gallons of mash in there. So you're going to be getting 2.5 times what somebody would in a five that's running three, right? So yeah, but I would just do a sugar shine and run that. It's going to be hot, and it's going to have some burn to it, but you're going to learn and you're not going to waste money. I would, yeah, the slobber box just to catch anything that pukes. Yeah, I agree with Scott. Um, using that instead of a thumper because it's complex as a thumper and generally it'll get filled up on you and that becomes a problem as well. But if you use it as a slobber box and you puke over, which most people do because they tend to overfill their stills when they first run them because they don't realize, just boil water. Just go onto your stove and fill a pot about 4/5 the way up and just turn it on boil and watch it. Just pure water foams up, right? So you can imagine what a beer is going to do, right? And that's basically what your grain, mashes are is a beer. So imagine how much a beer is going to foam up. So you can degas if you want to help cut down on that foam. You can put some butter in there to help cut down on that foam, or some edible oil, a vegetable oil, or something like that. But you start worrying about flavor when you get in the vegetable oils and stuff. But yeah, but yeah, starting out with a thumper, which is kind of an intermediate thing, it's not for beginners really. But your biggest challenge is going to be getting those fittings to seal without cracking them. So not tight enough and they'll leak, too tight and they crack and leak. So it's tough. So a lot of people end up replacing a lot of those fittings coming out of the pot. They replace it with a little bit larger copper, which will help, especially on a 13 and a 15 and an 18. On fives and to tens, not quite as important, but when you start getting 13, 15, you could use a little bit more better, larger size and kind of you can control the temperature in your pot with less pressure too. And those real small ones tend to cause a little back pressure, so it helps definitely. Good to see you, Scott. You've been around a while, brother. Of course, we haven't either. I've been in. We missed this past weekend. We missed a few in the last couple months. Well, brother, we're going to be here every Wednesday and Saturday, so we welcome you. And if you want to join us on Facebook, you can join us at DIY Shine and stuff. And Clint and I can help you out there as well, or in the Moonshine Militia. There's a lot of people there that can help you as well. I'm an admin there as well, so we can help you in both. Yeah, that's right. In a year or so, you'll have learned enough. You'll be here and helping others. You'll be telling everybody your experience with the Vever and what kind of gaskets you got to replace it, and little bulkhead fittings coming out of your lids, and how you made you a good condenser to work with it. It's a great hobby and learning process, and it's a hobby that's not only just good to make alcohol to drink, but it's tinctures. You can use alcohol for a lot of tinctures to create medicine. Holistic type medicines that they used to use back in the old days and still do in some places. And also, antiseptics for cuts and things of that nature. We talked. There's a lot of uses for it. If you can get high enough proof, you can run some of your engines on it if you can tune them. So yeah, there's Yeah, it's an awesome hobby, and we're glad to have you, brother. But yeah, look us up on Facebook, and you don't have to wait till Wednesday and Saturday to ask your questions. But jump in here anytime, and we'll help you along. Hopefully by next Wednesday, if you start that sugar wash today, by next Wednesday you'll be ready to run it. If your temperature, if everything's right, keep your temperatures and everything proper. But yeah, if the shit hits a fan, alcohol has a lot of uses. Sure does. It's good to barter with too. Everybody likes it pretty much. And if the shit hits a fan, even the people that didn't like alcohol before may start liking it. Some of the stresses. But yeah, it's a good hobby to have and know. We're all learning. There's something I learn here every day. Every time we run the podcast. That somebody will ask a question about something. I never really thought about. Like, can you ferment a mushroom? I never really thought about it, but and a lot of people ask a lot of different fruits, vegetables. I've been getting a lot of pumpkin lately because it's Halloween, and a lot of leftover pumpkins, and get a lot of questions about pumpkins. And I've discovered that there's plenty of starches in pumpkins. There's a lot of water, kind of, not like a watermelon water, but a lot of water in them. So doesn't take a lot of water along with them, and they have about a third of the starches that a sweet potato would. So you'll probably have to use maybe twice or three times as much pumpkin as opposed to. That's something I was going to do. I didn't. Somebody was asking me, and I didn't have access to my little list, and it's not on my phone. Usually, I have it on my phone. And contrary to popular belief, I can't remember everything. I remember less and less. But I wasn't sure if this had watermelon, or I mean pumpkin on there, and it doesn't. So wait a minute, let me remove that. Maybe it's down here. Now let's see. Let me remove that as well. No, I don't see pumpkin anywhere. Sweet potato on there? No, that's not either. So sugar wise, less than strawberries. Just pronogram, yeah, it's going to be less than strawberries. More than lemon though. But yeah. So not a lot of sugars, natural sugars. It's a fructose, but there are, I think it's 1.7 and 1.4 fructose and glucose in there. So maybe 3.1, which is going to put a little bit between a lemon and a strawberry. Not a lot, but there's starches. Consider not a huge amount, but enough to convert. And enough that. But when you do that, cook it 185 degrees, gelatinize it just like you would a corn or anything else. The starch is a starch. They are a little bit different, but you have to gelatinize them, and then you have to break them down from the complex, amylopectins or amylose that it is into simple sugar. So you use your high temp amylase and chop those, debranch up all those complex sugars, and then follow up the glucose to make them into mono or disaccharides that the yeast can eat. It's the same as anything else. It's like a sweet potato or anything else. One thing I would do is smoke. So you can smoke. Yeah, you can cut them into chunks, put them in your smoker. We're not dealing with any amylase. I would say there probably is some natural amylase in there, but I didn't research that. But I'm sure there probably is, being similar to a sweet potato. Sweet potatoes have considerable amounts. But yeah, so maybe smoke them and then mulch them up and then cook them, and then do your amylase, gelatinize them. 885 for an hour and a half at least, 90 minutes plus, and then high temp naturally cools to 140. Add your glucose, depending on the glucose that you use. Maybe 100, 140, depending on the type you use. And again, with the alpha same. So always consult the labels on those. 40-pound bag of cracked corn, some oyster shells. Hell yeah. And a lot of people don't realize, with the sour mashes, it's really vital that you do try to buffer it, because that back set can get, very acidic. We want the bitterness and the sour that comes with the acidity, but we don't want too much, and we want all that flavor that it contains as well. So buffering that down so we can use more of those back sets and get more of that flavor in there definitely helps a lot for sure. Hey, if we ain't learning, I don't know. Some people are resistant to learning. They figure they know it all, and they feel it's a bruise of their ego if they admit that they've learned something or didn't know something, didn't know it all. Shoot. I mean, there's some of the most brilliant people out there to say, I'm learning too. What's the name of that? I'm starting to forget, and I'm having to relearn. That's what happens when you get my age. You're not just learning shit, you're relearning a lot of things. So I'm having to relearn a lot of things because I'm forgetting everything. But yeah, Patrick Heist, um, one of the co-owners of Firm Solutions. Brilliant guy, scientist, understands this on a much higher scientific level than I could even dream of. I mean, they do genetic research, they do genetic testing, um, very, very advanced. And even Patrick, he's learning. So even probably one of the brightest minds in the industry, is learning stuff every day and more and more. I doubt there's as much room. He's probably learned more than most everything, and probably um, less things to learn. But I'm sure he would agree that, definitely learning every day. But him and Shane Baker both at Firm Solutions, very, very knowledgeable. But yeah, Patrick Heist, country boy, married Kentucky, and probably one of the most brightest minds in the distilling industry, for sure. Very, very brilliant guy. Oh, I manage, man, but I'm probably about 80% what I used to be. There's definitely, I can definitely see some cognitive decline. The simple things. A lot of times, I'll remember complex stuff, and a lot of times it's just simple things that I just can't think of the word. It just eludes me. It's just I draw a blank. It's like a doe in headlights. I just stop mid sentence. It's like, and most people can just keep on talking and go and work around it. Me, I just frozen. What is that word? What? And so I depend on Clint and Lisa used to help me out a lot, but I think I think they do a podcast the same night as this, so maybe not as able to help me anymore. But yeah, she used to finish my sentences for me. Yes, ma'am, it is. White lightning. And Hank Williams Jr., Pike County White Lightning in one of his songs. So he's talking about the same thing. I always bragged and said it's Pike County, Kentucky, but I'm pretty sure it's a county maybe in Georgia or Tennessee. I think it's Georgia. I'm Googling that. Yeah, I think it's Georgia. But I know when he came to Pike County and sang live, he said it was about there, but I'm pretty sure when he wrote the song, it was about Pike County, Georgia. But yep, yeah, sure is. I love that old some old George Jones music too. Oh, man, it is a struggle. I'm telling you, man. The best thing I found is just the little oil filled radiators, and I keep my barrels a foot away from them. That it's at radiant heat, right? And I just go in and gently turn the barrels every day a little bit, and I can regulate those pretty well. It's got the adjustment on it, so it works. It works the best of anything that I've seen, and safe. You got the coils that light up red, and it's they get wet, they explode and send little shards and fire everywhere. But the oil field, when they get knocked over, they automatically turn off unless they have a fault. But probably one of the safer ways to heat, and it's not a real harsh, forced heat. It's you know it works real well. And I use big, the blue barrels. I'll just set it in the middle of 3 or 4 barrels, and it'll do just fine, and I just rotate them every day or two, and it works out pretty well. And it keeps the room temperature pretty much normalized, and it does real well inside. Now, outside, yeah, it's not gonna. It's if your temperature's got a major fluctuation, it's tough to keep anything regulated. But inside it, they work real well. I've been real pleased with it. I hate the thought of using. I mean, I've got fish tanks and nice fish tank heaters and Eheim and old um, what's that Swiss made one? I can't remember what it is. See, another thing. Um, it's like a Swiss made heater. They're real good ones. Anyway, I got some of those. I wouldn't dream of sticking one of those down in there with mash and all that. It's scorched little grains floating around. It's just some people had success with them, but I've also seen nightmares where they just pull the little aquarium heater out and it's got little black corn stuck to it, and it's scorched and ruined a whole big barrel of mash. I'm not taking that kind of chance. Yeah, yeah, that would be nice, man. If you wanna, or we can do some research and teach what we learn. But yeah, the Quebec yeast, I mean, it's just a different strain and gives us, real good flavor, so it's just, you know, different yeast. I don't know if what the uniqueness of it is other than, good flavor. And I do know that it works grain off pretty quickly. A lot of people use it for grain. I don't know. People use it a lot for brandies too. I've always heard it was great for grains, but not used a lot of Quebec yeast. I'm just getting ready to use my yellow label angel yeast, so yeah, that's the pace I move at. But yeah, I mean, I used for 30 years. I just used regular Fleischmann's bread yeast and SAF yeast and just whatever I could get at the grocery store. Before Amazon and the internet and all these things popped up, where you can order from all over and opened up the world. But in little East Kentucky, you didn't have a lot of choices, and you couldn't get malts and all that fancy stuff either. So that kind of limited, a lot of the moonshine that was made back in the day to what was available. So, if you grew up in farm country, you had a little benefit. You may be able to get a farmer that raises wheat and grains, but in the mountains, you don't have that kind of farming. You can get some corn in, cornmeal, but yeah, it's hard to get. And you had to malt your own. No malt houses back then. Yeah. It in like washes, like a tequila, which your tequila really needs a warm ambient temperature. The tequila wash, it would probably be perfect in something like that that didn't have grain or something that could scorch, or a sugar wash or something like that, or even a wine must that had all the fruit removed and it was just pretty much the liquid, or something that you want to keep the temperature up. But yeah, I've seen them drop it down in the grains and pull out and just have corn stuck to it all the way down, black corn. It looked horrible. I felt so bad, but yeah, 50 gallons of mash gone, 40 some gallons in a 55-gallon drum. Yeah, there's a lot of people that use the fish tank heaters. And you can get the steel ones that aren't glass and they run a lot less risk of breaking, but still you're gonna the oyster shells, you can get those at Farmers, Tractor Supply, Farmers Feed and Supply. Most of your it's used for chickens. They use it to help supplement their diet and keep the calcium up. So, they'll crush that up and they'll packet that calcium and get it in their systems. And it's great for gardening as well. But yeah, you get I think the 40-pound bag for like 13, $15, something like that, and it lasts forever. I mean, literally. I throw it in the ground with my uh, tomatoes. When you start getting the black spots on them, it's from low calcium. So you need to start adding that to your water. I'll put some in the water that I sit around and let sit and let calcium build up in that as well. And I'll introduce it into the surface of the soil. So when I water it, it goes through that and that helps for sure. But yeah, keeping things warm is not as big an issue down there as so down there. That's for tequila washes, that's awesome because they like it warm. But it depends on the mash. The bigger the mash, of course, the more you can use. My mashes are generally 20, 30 gallons, and I'm using 4 big old handfuls. So I don't think you can over or underdo it. I don't think it adds flavor or takes away flavor or anything like that. It's just basically a calcium, carbonate. It's pretty neutral flavored, and the calcium actually is an essential element or nutrient in the fermentation process. It's actually needed. So is zinc and a few other things. So um, yeah, just get them and I boil them. I'll get a pot of boiling water and just dump them in the boiling water and let it come back to a boil. Keep them stirred up real good and then just let it cool and pour it off and then rinse some cold water and rinse them out real good and then just throw it in some cheesecloth or if you have a little small brew bag, a little small top brew bag, um, that'd work just as well as well. It just has to be a nice little teeny paint bag. Those work. Um, but just rolling it up with some cheesecloth works just as well. And when you're done, take them out, throw them in the pot, rinse them out good, shake it, and get all your little particles of food out of there. Kind of rinse them out real good, and rinse your cheesecloth out, let it dry, put them back in there, and you'll be ready for the next one. And then your sour mash, of course, you just leave them in there. Pantyhose. Now let's see. Are you using the foot or the crotch? I shouldn't say that. That's terrible. I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. Yeah, and it helped. It definitely keeps it out of the grain bed. But when they're moving around, you got a lot of foaming activity. You got stuff on the surface, and then you got stuff down below, and there's that little, you know, Cinderella zone in the middle, what they call it. You got that perfect little zone in the middle. You can try to get that heater out in there. Yeah, no, 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 no. Yeah, I boil and rinse them. And after you use them, you don't have to continuously boil them, but it wouldn't hurt to just in case there's any bacteria in them, you can kill everything off. So yeah, you can just boil them up every time, and you can just get a small pot. It doesn't take a big pot, and it boils fast, and And just anything generally over 160, 65 degrees kills a lot of the things off. But there's still some bacteria that's not killed at that point. But yeah, if you rinse them out good, and then yeah, you can boil them each time. But if they're liking a sour mash, just leave them in there. They you know, it's not a problem. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah, you can't use too much. It's just what it does is as things become more acidic, it eats away at that calcium and just helps neutralize itself, so it doesn't allow it to get real low, but it's not going to shoot your pH up, right? It just keeps it from getting to a certain point. It doesn't um, boost pH, it buffers the pH, so it prevents the acidity from getting to a certain point. The more you have, the better the chances are that you're going to prevent it from getting that. But then again, it becomes overkill if you get too much. But yeah, it's you know, I wouldn't use a whole bag, but yeah, I think it comes in like 40-pound bags, and I think Tractor Supply's 40-pound bag was like 15 bucks, maybe somewhere in that range, and they're supposedly, already um, sanitized for use with your poultry and stuff. But yeah, I go ahead and boil them up and clean them each time. It's a good idea too. I know what you're laughing about. Them. uh, hey, I tell you what. You know what? Another good thing those pantyhose come in handy for. Yeah, I bet she's wondering why you. Where did all my pantyhose go, Clint? Have you been in my pantyhose again, Clint? But yeah, this is a hint you won't hear anywhere else. But pantyhose are excellent to tie your tomatoes to your cages. It allows it to breathe, so it doesn't kind of bind it and kill it off. It allows that stock to breathe, and it has some give. So when they start pulling and getting weight, they can stretch a little bit. It makes it a really perfect tie for your tomatoes. Yeah, yeah, you gotta find the ones that have the runs in them. Well, now the sour mash you don't want to introduce a lot of alcohol. So when you do use your back set, you really have to run it down to the end of your tails, because you don't want to. A lot of people stop at 80, proof when they start getting into the tails. At 80 to 100, in that range, 70 to 100, depending on what you got. Um, yeah, that's very, very high proof. And you pour that in your back set, you just sterilize your sour mash. You just sterilize your sour mash and you killed all the yeast that's existing in there. So you created more nutrients, but you're going to have to add yeast. So to avoid that from happening, to avoid having to reuse the yeast and add more yeast, you generally want to run it down to 10, and I think that would be a pretty good spot. And then you're adding water along with the new mash and more sugar and water and stuff. So it gets diluted down pretty quickly. And it's a good idea too, when you do run it down to 10%, go ahead and pull the top off your still, if you have that type of still, and start adding your sugar to it to add to your sour mash, and 10% of your grain. If you're going to replace grain, you can heat it up in there. You're not converting. Um, but if you are converting, you can put that hot grain in that back set at 180, 85. There's no alcohol that's going to be coming off at 180 degrees at the end of the run. There's nothing coming off there that's dangerous. And you can use that to start cooking the next, 10% corn that you're going to throw in on it to get a little extra corn flavor, and, add your high temp to that just the same as you would water. So it saves the cook time, and throw that in, and that's the pattern you want to develop. You can add 10% grain. A lot of people don't add supplemental grains each time. On the sour mash, I try to. I'll pull X amount of pounds off, a coffee can off, and add a coffee can of new grain and cook it and convert it. And you don't have to. It's basically a sugar flavored corn wash. Anyway. So, but if you do convert it each time, you can get that little extra, good flavors out of the conversion. And if you use dextrose, that helps out a lot too instead of sugar. So if you can use dextrose or corn syrup, that'll help your sour mash too. It makes it a lot better sour mash. You learned that here too. The secrets, because sugar makes it a little hotter. Right, and the pH. The pH is what a lot of times, regulates what and how much backset you're going to add. So, again, once you get into a pattern, you'll know exactly, how much backset you're going to be adding each time. So, if you've got 10 gallons of, a backset in there and you only need like 6, take out 4, throw in your corn, heat it up, cook it, convert it, throw it in a little amylase, convert it, let it cool, dump it in there, add your dextrose, whatever, and you'll develop a pattern, and you can just do the same thing. Just keep doing the same thing, repeat, rinse, wash, and if as long as you keep adding a little bit of fresh grains each time, you won't get depleted on your 5th to 6th, 7th generation. It starts to get pretty much depleted, flavor wise, and if you keep doing that, it'll help a lot. It helps even more if you infuse with some cream corn too. I tell you, old Colby makes some good corn liquor, man. I had some of his corn liquor this past weekend. I'm telling you, that's about as good a corn liquor as I've had. He does a real good job, man. On a 10-gallon bever. Damn good job. Yeah, yeah. It just becomes a process, and once you get a balance, and once you get it, an equilibrium, right? You just keep doing the same thing over and over and over, and just keep all your variables constant, and you'll get a rhythm, and just keep repeating and doing it over and over again, and it'll be a very consistent. That's the thing about, anybody can distill, and anybody can open up, a distillery as long as you got the funding. But once you do, the biggest problem most people have is developing consistency, because that's what people want. They want that next bottle they buy to taste just like the bottle they bought today. So 6 months from now, they want that bottle to be just like the bottle they bought today. And that's one of the most difficult things to do, is replicate and make things exactly like they were. So that's when the science becomes involved, and it's like cooking. It's all in measurements, and temperatures, measurements, times. It's all, same thing in a chemical, in an experiment in chemistry, or something you would do in a chef, or in a kitchen. It's all about the exact same amount of spice, or the exact same amount of grain, and the exact same cooking time, and keep all these variables constant and measured, and you will develop consistency. And that's the hardest thing to do, is get good consistency. Yeah. And a lot of people with the sour mashing, they don't convert. They won't convert the fresh corn. They just do the conversion the first time, and then they'll get to 5th or 6th generation out, and then it'll wash out the flavor. And I mean, the flavor just depletes and depletes and depletes, and it's not consistent. And by the 6th, 7th, 8th generation, it's just not tasting as good anymore. It doesn't have that corn flavor, and then they'll just dump it and start over again. But if you can balance it by adding like 10% each time, maybe 15, That'll balance. So you'll figure that out as well. And it's, there's no set. You may find that 20, is better for you. Add 20 for a fifth generation. That would work out to about, changing out 100% over five. If you just change 20 over five times, you'd be changing 100% out. So, yeah. So, but consistently, yeah, that's the toughest thing. Yep. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you save a lot of money for sure. And that was one of the reasons that it was done. Um, the distilleries, once you start distilling, you'll see the amount of grain, right? And you just see all this grain. It's like, I need to either buy some hogs or I need to find something to do with this. I'll throw it out and I'll bring deer in so I can feed deer, or I can feed hogs, or I got to do something with it. It's just I hate wasting it, man. It's good grain, but it's not something I'm wanting to, put on my plate exactly, but I got to find some use for it. So, you know, um, and some people just, put it in their mulch piles and recycle it that way. That's fine. And some feed deer, but some feed hogs, and some, water it, rinse it, and feed the chickens, and some don't, just have drunk chicken. But yeah, sour mashing process is it really was a big money saver for the margins, like we were talking about earlier. The margin in the distilling business is pretty tight, so it definitely helps. No, sir, I have never made pine soda, but I've not even heard of pine soda, so you've piqued my curiosity. Tell us about the pine soda, my friends. See, I'm learning something tonight. I've seen people use juniper berries and pine needles and make a pine needle tea or something like that, but pine soda is a new one. Absolutely. Me and Mikey Frame, he's a commercial distiller in Indiana, and we sat down and did the math, and it is much cheaper. And there's a reason that they make ethanol with corn instead of sugar. It is much less expensive to convert your corn and get your sugar that way than to use the table sugar or any other sugar for that matter, unless you grow your own cane, and that's pretty cheap. Yeah. Or no. I'll tell you what. Now, some of your best rums, Matthew, Google dunder pits and read about dunder pits. And that's basically the sour mashing of the rum industry. And some of your finest rums that come from, the islands, they have a dunder pit, and that stuff gets grungy. I mean, they throw dead animals and shit in there, and it just makes it better and better. That's your homework for tonight. Read about dunder pits, Dunder pits, and it's basically the sour mash of the rum industry. So check that out, and it you can really get some deep flavors, and I'm not kidding about some of the dead animals. I mean, they put like a turkey and pachuga, which is a tequila. So the pachuga, has this turkey suspended inside in the distilling pot. So you know it's not that far off, but yeah, it's crazy. And they actually, I think they tried to do it. They had a distillery out in California, and they were trying to do a dunder pit out there in OSHA, and it came by and they saw the dunder pit, and they're like, no, they wouldn't permit it because it is gross, and it's outside, it's exposed. You got probably bugs crawling and flies buzzing, and I'm sure you got some fruit flies and everything, and it just, I don't know, makes it better maybe. It gets crazy. But yeah, read about dunder pits, man. You'll be shocked at some of the things that you probably have drank some rum from some of these um, um, distilleries down in the, I guess, in the Caribbean that use these dunder pits. Yeah, pretty wild. But do read about that. You'll be amazed. And if you're a big rum, maybe you'll start creating your own little dunder pit, but do it outside because I'm sure it gets pretty reek. I'm sure it gets pretty smelly. But yeah, they keep all that leftover and all that leftover molasses and everything. They run it down to the tails just like in the sour mashing process. But they keep that and keep adding to it and building it. Pretty interesting. Pine sodas. So it's a okay. So it's a pine kombucha, I guess. So it's like a pine needle kombucha. Now I've tasted, like a pine tea, yeah, um, but I don't think they ever fermented and made a kombucha out of it. But that's interesting. Sprite like taste. That's interesting because I'm not real big on gins because the juniper berries. I don't like the real piney flavor. It dominates the gins too much for me. I like Philbilly's made some interesting gin. Lisa Lowry makes some really really good gin that uses some other spices other than just juniper berry heavy and uses some citrus and other things that really come out when you eliminate a lot of that heavy juniper flavor. Then you get some really interesting. So I'm big on. I used to hate gin until I started tasting gin that didn't have the juniper berries, that did have a lot of the other botanicals and some of the essence of fruit, and I guess they scrape the the skins off the lemons and limes and oranges and other things to get the essence of some zest, I guess, of the fruit, and they're really really good. So it's kind of made me come back to um, moths drinking some gins. You have to check it out, man. They do some interesting stuff on there. Dunder pits, yeah, man, it's crazy. Right, Dunder, yeah, it's crazy what they put in there. Yeah, I knew what you meant. That autocorrect's a bitch, ain't it? Clint's on his phone, man. I don't see how you type that fast, man. I double strike. I hit double keys. My L and K, that's one of my worst double strikes. I hit that K. Yeah, I don't think OSHA will allow it. So you have to kind of, keep that under your hat or, keep it in a barrel, just don't do it in the ground, with plastic or whatever like they do. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think OSHA would. I don't think they're going to let you, FDA, OSHA. I'm not sure who would come in, but yeah, they're not going to like it. Yeah, it's as it sits, it gets better. I mean, spruce tipped beer. I've never been a big piney taste. That flavor for me has never been a big plus. I do know that there are some health benefits from it. So there's definitely holistically and for certain things. I'm not sure, is a diuretic maybe, but there's some benefits. Felicia was on here. She'd know. She's into that stuff, and she's my botanical gal. Very knowledgeable. No. Yeah, And sometimes wild yeast, it's hit and miss with the wild yeast. If you're in an area and it's pretty good, it's fairly consistent. So, you think wild yeast, it's just hit and miss. Maybe it's something this week and next week is, it's generally sometimes not even wild yeast. It's just a yeast that's been existing for a long time. Like I know Alan Bishop did, and Bam Bam actually did too. After he and I talked about it, but Alan Bishop did a little tour, and he was going around to where some of these distilleries used to be in the 1800s, and some of them don't exist there anymore. But some of those yeast are still alive and thriving in the area. Now, if you have a certain room in your house, or if you have a shine shack that you do a lot of your fermenting in, whether you realize it or not, it looks like powder mold on your walls, but you've got yeast on your walls and stuff. You can take a Q-tip and you can swab those walls down and drop that in a shot glass of sugar and watch it bubble. You'll pull yeast right off the walls and woods and inside distilleries, even operating distilleries, if they have special yeast. When you do that distillery tour, take your little baggie in your pocket and have a handful of Q-tips, and as you go through there, just kind of, oh, that's nice, and kind of rub it, palm it, and rub it on something. Yeah, that's pretty. And load up that thing with yeast, and you can take it home and multiply that yeast and propagate it and get their secret yeast. But most of them you can probably buy at Firm Solutions, truth be told. That's cool. Yeah, now if it tasted like Sprite, I'd be all for it, because I dig Sprite. I drink that at night a lot of times. So if I don't want to get the caffeine, keeping me up at night, I'll at about this time of night I'll start drinking some Sprite. And yeah, I can't either. I've never been. Actually, I used to like gin, and we used to drink Tanqueray a lot. And after I got sick on it, and have that after you throw it up, having it come out of your nose and all that gin and all, that was it for me. It was a long, long time before I ever drank gin again. And still, that I just don't like the USDA probably would be yeah. Yeah, Department of Agriculture, USDA, OSHA, FDA, Food and Drug. I don't know. One of them would have some say in it. Yeah, she doesn't need to know. She doesn't know anyway. You just want to see your paperwork. Yeah, I mean they have some big old pits, and they have animals crawling in them and die, and they don't even fish them out. Like, yeah, add more flavor, mine. Add more flavor to the rum, mine. Yeah, okay. You're smoking too much that ganja, mine. Yeah, it does mine. That and a soda cracker works every time. Helps that bubble gut. Oh, it's getting close to 10. All right, now what we're going to do, we were going to try to do it tonight, but I just didn't get the prep time, and I was gone over the weekend, and it was hectic earlier this week. But I think Clint and I are going to try to put together a start to finish. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about all the tools that you need, and this is going to be basic. This is going to be for beginners, nothing major advanced and nothing crazy, but something everybody should have. So we're going to go over all the little tools you need, your hydrometers, thermometers, your graduated cylinders. Now, a lot of these things you don't have to have, but it's a good practice. So if you want to make the hobby a good hobby, and you get into kind of the science of it, and you like your little chemistry and doing that, you know, it's going to be a lot of fun. But we're going to go from beginning to end on what you need and what you need to do a basic grain wash or a grain mash. We'll do a corn, and we may delve into a little bit of multi-grain. It's not hard. It's not a big deviation from an all corn. You just add more grain as the temperature cools. So we're going to do a start to finish. So the guys in here that's first timers and just learning, it'll be a perfect opportunity for you all to tune in and follow along. Now we're going to try to take less questions because we will be covering most questions that you have. But like if we're at a specific area and you have a question that we didn't mention, we'll try to field that. But while we're talking about mashed bacon, don't ask about a condensing issue or something like that, because we will cover that when it's further along the line. So what we're going to try to do is just right. It's and again, a lot of these tools you don't have to have. You don't have to have a mud mixer and a drill. You can use a paddle. You don't have to have a paddle. You can use a stick. you know, but there is certain practices that will help make the hobby more enjoyable and will make your product most likely a little better, and more consistent too. So we'll delve into the little bit of the science. Now pH, you don't have to take pH. I made shine for 3 decades without ever dropping the first litmus paper in it. But now that I understand yeast and stress and the acids and organic acids and how they develop, especially in washes and tequilas and rums, you really need to focus more on pH for those. And like a simple grain mash that's done in 4 or 5 days, it really doesn't pH crash like some of the higher sugar content musts and mashes do. But we'll talk about a lot of the tools that will make it a better hobby and make it easier on you. But again, we'll go into, you don't have to have these. You can just use cornmeal, cornmeal, sugar, yeast, water. You can use that, and that's it. Product's not going to be the greatest, but you can make a thin mash, and that's all you need. You don't need a thermometer. You don't need nothing. You can use your finger. You can make it just as crude as you want to make it, or you can refine it and learn about the science of it and eliminate some of the stresses. What's going on, old toes? Good to see you, brother. So you can, kind of, eliminate a lot of issues with a little preparation and, a little forethought. You can do a sugar shine with just sugar, water, and yeast. It'll stress the hell out of it. The pH will crash. It'll get stuck. You'll dump more yeast in. It'll go a little while. It'll stress and stop. You'll dump more yeast in. It'll taste like shit. It'll taste like yeast, but you can do it that way. Now, it might not be the best way, but you can do it that way. So a lot of people argue, you don't have to have all that. You don't. You absolutely don't. But to help neutralize the pH a little bit, those oyster shells do go a long damn way. And to test for that acid to see if that's the problem, instead of dumping a shitload of yeast that you waste a lot of money on, that probably more expensive than the little teeny little 1-inch litmus paper that you're going to drop in there. Yeah. There's a ounce prevention, pound a cure kind of thing, a little, maybe, I don't know. I paid $9 for a big roll, 180 inches. I do it about half. So that's 360. Let's see. 9 divided by 360. Oh, it's about 2.5 cents per test. Or you can just keep dumping $5 worth of yeast in there every time. What's your choice going to be? 2.5 cents or a shitload of expensive yeast? But you start figuring out the cost of these things and breaking it down. It's just the best way to go. Nutrients, another thing. You can boil yeast. That's a very expensive nutrient. Yeast ain't cheap. Even bread yeast, none of that's cheap. That I can get a pound for $11, and you just use a little teeny tiny, teaspoons, of this stuff. So it doesn't take much. So we figure the cost is like 30 cents for a big 10-gallon mash or something. It's just nothing. So that yeast that you try to boil is going to cost more than the 30 cents of that DAP would cost. So there's a lot of things you can do. And yeah, the thermometer, really the thermometer, the only time I really do a lot of temperature testing is when I do my grain conversion. I want to make sure that I keep a consistent 185 degree, you know, temperature. So I'm adding a little bit of hot water, it's got to last for an hour and a half, right? So I'm stirring, and I'm going to add a little bit of hot water, keep it at 185. It gets down to 175. Add more hot boiling water to it, brings it back up to 187, 190, and it'll drop back down. Keep doing that, and having the thermometer is pretty helps a lot. But cooling, also your thermometer comes in very handy, measuring the temperature of the water that you're condensing with. And if you can keep that 60 to 75 degrees, somewhere in that range, it it definitely helps a consistent product coming out. That the oils and everything will be just properly aligned. The molecular, you won't get saponification. You won't get your oils hardening. You won't be cold filtering right in your worm, right? And a lot of people don't like cold filter liquor because it takes out some of those oils that saponify and get filtered off, and it takes away some of the character of the whiskey. So a lot of people and they can taste the difference. These connoisseurs, they can taste the whiskey and say, that was that cold filtered? And they'll look on the label, yeah, cold filtered. Yeah, I could tell it didn't have those oils in there, and it didn't esterify well, and it was missing these notes and characters. I mean, yeah. So it does. What's going on, Byron? How's things going, brother? Is that a Santa suit? I see some red wine on there. Yeah, I try to preach modular, and I preach a keg or the old Vever football. It's either a keg or this right here. Best thing for beginners, period, hands down. If you can afford a copper steel, of course, you just replace this stainless pot with a copper pot, and you can put a copper head on there just like this football, just the same. Or you put this football or something like it on top of a keg, and you can also put a column on this, just like you can a keg. Keg's probably a little sturdier than these. And if it's sitting in the corner, it looks like a beer keg. This sits in the corner, it looks like a moonshine still, right? So, it kind of, disguises itself. But I think this setup here is set up for great for brandies and whiskeys with that head on it. And it's got rectification. It's got some valves on it. I don't know how well rectifying it would do, but it will give you some. Yeah, but you can blow off some of your heads with it. But yeah, it's a good little, and you can do the same thing with the keg. So I think for beginners, shotgun condensers are awesome. It's not as good as a copper worm, but it's better than a Liebig. So that's kind of in the middle. But I run a shotgun on mine. I love it. It does a very efficient, does a fine job. Well, I hope not. If you're 12, you really don't belong here. I hope you're just kidding me. Worms better. The copper. You have the copper and the speed at which it condenses. So the top of your worm is hotter, and it slowly cools as it lowers. You've got a much deeper chamber, of liquids around it to cool it. so you don't have as much fluctuation in temperature as you probably would in a shotgun. But just the cooling process is much more gradual as it works its way down, and it's coming in contact with the copper. So you're removing sulfites, that the mesh may not have gotten, or the other copper in the process. Um, I did have this. I started when I was 12. Is why I hate to say anything. It makes me a hypocrite, but I'm not wanting a 12-year-old to be doing this. I shouldn't have been, but I was doing a lot of things at 12 I shouldn't have been. Um, well, that's good if it's copper, but again, with the worm, you have that gradual cooling that's not more sudden. More sudden is probably not as good as a gradual cooling effect. Um, but I'm not saying it's notably worse or better. Most of your shotguns are stainless, and that's more what I was geared towards. Most of them are like a foot and a half long and stainless versus a long copper coil that has a lot cooler. It's a lot easier to regulate your coolant temperature around it, unless you come out of a reservoir, which in case it's fine. And I mean, the shotgun condensers are fine. It's just that I think the worm is probably the best way to go, and then of course the shotgun, and then the Liebig is going to be the least efficient and the least best. Yeah, I use uh, I use a reservoir of water, and I don't return. I kind of mix the return water. Sometimes if it gets a little too cool, I'll take the tube coming off, and I'll run it into that to keep the temperature in. And that's why I use a thermometer in my coolant to try to keep a constant temperature. That's one of the few places that I will use, a thermometer and regulate temperature is there in the coolant temperature. But it just seems if you got a bigger flake and a bigger reservoir, it's a lot easier to keep that regulated, and feeding into a big flake doesn't get real hot on you. But in a shotgun, you get a pretty rapid, but not near as bad as like a Liebig. So it's kind of in between for me, but it works fine. I mean, that's what I use, a shotgun condenser. It's perfectly fine. I mean, if I thought a worm was that much greater, but there is also a convenience of space and having a closed system where you can force water through a shotgun condenser and get more circulation, and then you can, like in certain flakes where you have to let it drain through a half-inch line, so you can only feed it in so fast that 1-inch line can drain, because that only has a certain capacity for draining, so you can't over exceed that or it spills over. So what's going on, Hugo? Yeah, I hate doing that, but yeah, we can't have 12-year-olds in here. We have to be responsible. And if you're kidding, you'll have to prove your age. We can't have children in here. That, I don't want some dad saying, you taught my kid to do this. Yeah. Then that's what I say. You need to watch your fucking kids doing on the internet, right? This is for adults. But yeah, there's a lot of craziness out there. Hate abandoned boy, but can't have 12-year-olds in here. Right, dwell time. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. And it's just a slower conversion from hot to cool. It's more gradual, and they found that a little bit more gradual cooling somehow beneficial, but more beneficial molecularly with the oils. That gets a little bit above the head there. But yeah, it's on a molecular level. But they found that cooling slower like that is beneficial. Yeah, no matters lamb. Is she a coal miner? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I use mine for tinctures, for my pine tea tinctures. But yeah, we can't have children in here. I'm not gonna condone that. I can't have it. I gotta be responsible. You know, even though I started at a young age doing this too, I can't be a hypocrite. It can't be that way with our children. We got to teach them right and wrong, regardless of what we did. We can't look and say, "Well, I did that. I'm gonna let my child do it." No, no, it's not good parenting. So, yeah, and last week I do kind of want to apologize because I think the little guppy person was a kid too, and they got a little bit hurt because their question wasn't getting answered when they asked it. And it wasn't even for this week; it was from last week or something. And I'm pretty sure I answered all their questions, but no, actually, my parents didn't even drink a lot. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky in Pike County, and moonshine was just a way of life, and I've always been intrigued by it. And I always had an interest in it, and it was something that was fairly common. So, yeah. Um, so you get to a lot of cities, and you get out of Appalachia, and you get moonshine is just not a thing, right? A few people do it, and making meth, making moonshine, not a big thing. But the further back in the woods you go, a little more often you see these things. But where I grew up, moonshine was a very common thing. And unfortunately, meth is making meth is these days. But back in the old days, moonshine was just another occupation. It wasn't something you bragged about. They bragged about it. It's just something you did, and everybody'd visit their little local shiner and drive through. They had a little driveway that went around the house, and they'd go around back and roll down the window and give me money, get you shine, and roll right on. The bootleggers. So it was just another occupation. But I was kind of a wild kid. I was hopefully no kids are listening now, but really hard to that's a parental thing. But yeah, I was by the age I was 12 and 13, I was growing weed, making shine, and already somewhat promiscuous. So yeah, there's different times, a lot of fun, but yeah, I just can't, when I remember, when my little girl, when I was raising her, when she's 21 now, but when she was 12, I was thinking, oh my God, I can't imagine, her having, sex at this age. She was so naive. And I'm thinking, man, I was doing that at that age. How crazy is that? And I was definitely the kid the mamas didn't want their daughters being around. Uh, but yeah, I had a pressure cooker and a little copper coil we Jimmy rigged on there, and that's how we made our shine till we went to the keg still, and that was you know 16 to 18 and college age. But yeah, yeah, I was quite, but in East Kentucky anyway. That's how I got into it, and reading about it in the Foxfire books, and at a young age, gave all the instructions. And well, not all. It gave you the bare minimums, very bare minimums by compared to what we have, what we're exposed to with the internet, nowadays. But this is back in the 70s, early 70s. So different times, and but reading all that, I've always been fascinated by it. And then when I took high school chemistry and biology, I always I'd already been doing it, so I always kind of looked at that angle. Anytime they were talking about anything to do with with starches, carbohydrates, and all that kind of stuff, I perked up, and fermentation perked up. And our chemistry teacher, she knew, she knew where she was. So we went through a little fermentation, in chemistry, and learning how to make ethanol for scientific purposes, and learned, that way. And it was very interesting. And then, of course, I went to college, took chemistry and college level biology and college level chemistry, and organic chemistry and all that jazz, and learned a lot more, and I always looked at that too when we were working on stuff. Anytime it got into anything to do with making liquor, I would, apply what I was learning to that. And I was always interested in science anyways. It was one of my best subjects. So really enjoyed it, and it was just something fun. It's cool, all the we had something to drink and smoke all the time, which looking back probably not the best thing, and probably why I'm not able to remember everything quite as well as I should be able to. But that's so's life. But yeah, probably why I have glasses too. uh, yeah, yep. But my grandparents did make wine, and my great grandparents had a funeral home, and the embalming jars that they got were would come in with a cork. This is back before the caps, metal caps, and all that. It was cork, and so the embalming jars back then, glass jars weren't cheap, and everybody saved their jars and bottles, right? You didn't throw that shit away unless you were rich. Um, so I think they would trade some of the embalming jars maybe for a little whiskey or moonshine, and they'd exchange a lot of these embalming jars for some locally made shine, and I think it was a little barter, but it was that's awesome. Hey, Mr. Hillbilly, what's going on, brother? Not much, man. Talking about old times. Talking about what a wild child we were. I've got 80 gallon. Yeah. We used when we first started. I used wood. Yeah, we used wood. We didn't have propane for a long time. That wasn't available. So we made basically a little furnace with rocks, and set that pressure cooker right on it, and had a nice little rock, round rock thing with the front open, and a nice little furnace. Yeah. Yeah, man. So those little devils that I like. It wasn't too bad because at first it was because we scorched probably the first half dozen, runs that we did, just cooking the corn and all that, and just trying to cook the corn and the sugar and getting it all and heating it up. And yeah, we didn't get it, racked off well. It's got scorched runs, and it was horrible. Drank it anyway. But once we learned to use the coals and found, you get once it got to a certain temperature and you got your coals, you wouldn't have the smoke anymore, right? That was always a big concern, the smoke. People saying that, and that's one of the big things, benefits of propane. You don't have to worry about all that smoke, but it was pretty tough to use. But yeah, we got used to it. You come this, that's awesome, brother. That's a big move, man. It'd be good to get you on our side of the country, my friend. Induction is the way to go. Yeah, if you have a steel with proper metal, you may have to put like a metal plate underneath it, or maybe some stainless, balls that inside there that are, ferrous enough to for it to work. I know it works on certain stainless steels to a point, not as well as it would, maybe a cast iron pot or certain pots, but yeah, certain cast iron works well with induction burners, and definitely one of the most efficient, even ways to heat, and would be awesome. And a good constant, that would be perfect. Yeah, East Tennessee's nice, man. Yeah, I went for a long time without drinking. When I was younger, I wasn't much of a beer drinker, so when I did drink, it was usually whiskey, and I had a little trouble stopping. And a lot of times I wouldn't stop until yeah, induction won't work on your copper, but stainless. But you can put a plate in it, or I think people put stainless steel balls in it, and it also helps keep it from scorching. But yeah, you can put some stainless steel balls in the bottom of it, and it'll catch that and help. But yeah, I wouldn't stop till I hit the bottom of the bottle, and there'd be times when a fifth just wasn't enough. I'd sit and drink a fifth in an hour or two, and I needed more. Bad. And I got a lot of fights. Growing up, and I'd go to jail and fight, and um, you know, so's life in Eastern Kentucky. And sometimes it was buddies. We'd fight, and Monday, I'm sorry, man. I love you, brother. Yeah, I just drank too much. Go to jail. I've been, yeah, many times. Yeah, you could put some stainless steel balls in there, and it'll help keep it from scorching on the bottom, and they'll grab that heat. Or you can just use a little plate on the bottom to heat up, and it'll transfer the heat just fine. Yeah, wood was a bitch. Yeah, it certainly was. Definitely. And going from a pressure cooker with wood to a keg with propane was it's almost like going from propane to probably the electric's going to be for me. Yeah, yeah, it has to be somewhat magnetic. It has to, yeah. But certain stainless steels have enough magnetism, enough ferrous content, yeah, to where it will work, not as efficiently as some pots that have more, heavier content of steel. I will Google and see. I think it's the 400 series of stainless that has a higher steel content. I might be wrong. It might be the 300. And I think it's 304 maybe is the higher. Let's see here. Iron ferric stainless steels, essentially iron chromium alloys, with a lower carbon content, less nickel, more iron chromium. Let's see what series that is. Yeah, so fuck that, man. The searches don't do what they used to. Um, all right, let's just say what stainless does induction work on? AI sucks, man. I'm telling you. You type that into the search engine, you get a better answer now. Um, 300 series are generally not induction compatible because the nickel blocks it. 400 series, like 432 and other ferric stainless, are magnetic and work well with induction. Okay, so it is the 400. I was thinking it was. Yeah, the 400 series stainless, and it's not as common to see. Most of the stuff we see is 304, 316. So 432 and other ferric stainless are better, and you're not going to find those commonly from your Chinese pots. So there's the answer to that. But there is certain, um, I guess, more chromium steel than nickel steel. Uh, let's see what ball bearings. I think that's what they were using. Yeah, it's a chromium SA52, chrome steel or 440C stainless. That's probably 440C stainless ball bearings is what they're using, and that's probably a perfect choice to put even in your stainless pot. So if you can find some 440C stainless steel ball bearings, that's fill your pot with those. See, I mean, I sometimes I have to Google shit. I don't know all these answers, right? But I do know that knew the 400 series, but I knew they using ball bearings, but I didn't know the 440C. So, but yeah, the induction will heat it up really quickly. So it's yeah, they are. Induction pots would be very expensive. The 400 series stainless is very expensive, and it's not going to be something that you're going to see on your china pots. But I think some of them are slightly, maybe magnetic. But yeah, right. Well, I think I probably was an alcoholic then, but now that I'm matured, I think I can drink more responsibly. So yeah, I'm praying for him too. But that's all right. I'm not gonna ban somebody for spreading the word of God. And if that's what you want to do, man, that's more power to you. I doubt that you're gonna I doubt you're gonna convert anybody. I mean, we can believe in God and drink a little alcohol. I don't think in the eyes of the Lord there's a lot worse things happening these days. So might want to find a group full of worse sinners than what you found here, because most of us here are God-fearing Christians that like to imbibe a little bit. If I'm not mistaken, I think Jesus made wine. So move along some. Didn't he turn water into wine? They drank a lot of wine back then because a lot of the water was had they didn't know to boil it to kill some of the bad giardia and other stuff that were in the water. Well, I let people make their own decisions on what their level of drunk is or not. But I'm not gonna cuss you. I appreciate you, but at the same time, judge not, lest ye should be judged, right? So think about that as you judge us. You're sinning when you do that, more so than that drink I just took. So yeah, yeah. I was curious about that, Clint. Somebody was asking me the other day. They've got like I think it's a 50 some gallon pot, and I recommended three 5500s to go into that. That's right. Got to start early if you're gonna drink all day. But yeah, I drank a little bit when I was younger. A little bit more than I should have. And I went to church every Sunday. I let them go. I scroll on past it, man. You know, children I'll block, but I'll let somebody preach that if they want to. Hell, it's not bothering me none. You know, if it makes them feel better, that's fine. Yeah, I don't mind. I'm just not going. I'm not going to put it up on screen or anything. But I'm a God fearing man, and I appreciate he's trying to do, and but I do think that there are probably a lot of sites that could use you more than this one. In fact, I think most of us are to the point where we consume responsibly, but there's a lot more sinning and a lot worse sinning in a lot of other groups, my friend, that really could use your word. So I'm not saying you're wasting your time here, but your time probably could be better spent um, in some of these other groups that have definitely a moral decay that we don't want to see in our country. Yeah, yeah, we need Jesus. It's a stainless. It's a nice pot, and it's actually I don't think it's a Vendome, but it is a pot that was specifically made for distillation. It's a large, decent sized pot. He's put a few more welded a few more ports in it and clean outs and stuff. But before, I think I'm not sure how it was heated before, but it didn't have the elements, so he's putting some 2 inch. I recommended him put 3 2-inch ferrules in it to help heat it up. I think I think I think a 50. I think 3 elements would be good for that. He's excited. Yeah, I think so too. I agree, Scott. There's places that and y'all can block. If you don't want to see that. I'm not going to ban him or anything. I mean, he's I've had worse trolls. I don't know if y'all met or heard of ass eating Edith. Her name was Edith, and she liked to eat old Santa's arse. Man, now there, alien. You need to find her and make her repent. But yeah, I've had some pretty funny trolls over the years, man. It's been crazy. Yeah, YouTube has all sorts. You get a little bit. I don't know. I get more trolls from YouTube. Yeah, I think three worked pretty well in the 50. I get a lot more trolls from YouTube. I think there's more anonymity on YouTube with the names than Facebook. That's basically set up with you and your friends and everybody, family, and everybody you know in your whole life. Edith, yeah, I know her name was Edith, and she talked about eating everybody's ass. Man, she was crazy. I assume it was a she. Don't want to go there, but yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But anyway, Saturday, on a brighter note, Saturday we're going to do some beginning to end. We've done it before, but we getting quite a few newbies in here. That's not that they can use the instruction, and for the ones as far as viewership, what we see viewing in here is 17 on Facebook right now. By the time, and that's just on this channel, 18. Just jump, but by the time it's at the end of the week and next week, there'll be 500 to 1,000 views just on Facebook, and a lot of people. So I won't. I've done the math. I probably and it shows. I get a little graph, so it shows how many watched it today and during the week and stuff, and it just keeps growing. So most people watch this. Yeah, I don't know. So most people watch this later. So those that are watching later, definitely tune in Saturday if you live if you have questions. And I know a lot of people want to remain anonymous, so they just listen. We got a lot of lurkers, quite a few more on YouTube, I think, than Facebook. So we get probably 1,000, 2,000 views between all the different places we stream to um, each episode. So it's awesome. So those that if you have any questions, make a YouTube profile that's nondescript, just call yourself Edith, whatever, and just come in and if you have questions, you can ask anonymously, kind of that way. Nobody's just make up an email address, make a Hotmail or an Outlook or something, and use that to sign up on and make it anonymous and come in and ask you questions. And I know a lot of people are concerned they don't want to do it under their own name, and I understand, but if that's the case, make you a YouTube channel and under an assumed name, and don't be Edith though. I'll have one Edith, but yeah. I'll show you how. Let's see. I'll do you one better, brother. Yeah, look at all this stuff I gotta catch up on. I will post a link. Yeah, we got a few members in there. But there is the link for the DIY Shine and Stuff page. Got quite a few people in there. It's like 27,000, so it's a pretty good sized group we've had for years. Me and Eric Ayers started it years ago. And Eric, if y'all haven't met Eric or know, he's the scientist, and he and I got into some crazy shit and with our steel designs and stuff. And Eric made himself a little home continuous column and everything, man. He's quite ingenious, but he's gotten into blacksmithing now. So I don't think he makes as much shine as he used to. So he's into the blacksmithing now. So he's really into it. That's right. Yeah, I used to get a little bit nervous, and I don't post, if you notice, I don't post a lot of me running. Probably won't see too many of those of me anymore. That's kind of been something that gotten a lot of people in trouble a little bit, showing themselves running and showing the drip and showing the actual process. Of course, how do they know? How can they prove that that's actually alcohol coming off? I don't know. It could be just I'm distilling water like they do on the show. You never know. So, they can say all they want in court, but can you prove that wasn't water? No. So where's your evidence? You got to prove it. But when they have 10 or 20 cases of liquor, oh yeah, then it's kind of say, well, that wasn't what was coming. Yeah, it gets a little tougher. But do tune in Saturday, and definitely hit the like button, subscribe on whatever channel you're watching. I will say that YouTube, both the Philbilly and Militia YouTube channels, tends to send out notifications better than the YouTube channels. So definitely hit those as well. And yeah, I missed something. Yeah, 50 gallon. It's a little bit bigger, but you don't have to run 50. You can run 25, 30 in it. It's more flexible when you want to run more. And if you just want to run once and not often, but I think 30, back in the days during the old distilling org and back in the news groups and all that, I think 30 gallon and less was generally considered hobby sized. And anything above that was considered, small craft. But yeah, but and I allow you to stay LRC or whatever, Ilaris, Ilaria. Yeah, I can't pronounce your name, but as long as you don't personally make attacks or something like that, you can make all the comments you want. Just don't attack anybody personally, um, or preach any hate, or I will remove you. But yeah, it's 50 is fine. It's a little bit bigger than a 30 for sure, but you can run it and run it less often. If you just don't like having to run it so often and every week or two to get what liquor you can, to get that quart or two or a gallon or whatever off there. Uh, yeah, it's a little bit bigger, but yeah, once you get above 30, it probably might be a little harder to convince people that it's still a hobby, but it's nothing like the 100 plus, right? Yeah, yeah. This dude's not a beginner. He's seasoned. Yeah, keg's good. But I've got buddies that's got larger than 50s. That's definitely not the biggest. I used to run 80s. You know, and I know people that run a lot of 55-gallon steel drums. They buy the big stainless 55s and run those. Put some um, ferrules on it and let her rip. Yep. Yeah, 55, 50, 55s, the stainless ones. Yeah, you can pick them up for $250, 350. Get the ding specials. There's an outfit close to Fibula. He gets them and resells them. He welds ferrules in it and for a reasonable price and turns them over and makes a little profit. And everybody's happy. They got there's quite a few out there. Matter of fact, yeah, I won't say it. There's a lot of people out there buying them though. All right, y'all. I guess I'm gonna get out of here. It's almost 11. We've done about 2 hours 43. It's been a good session. Had a lot of good conversation. I love getting in here with you guys every Wednesday and Saturday and talking. Love getting the beginners in here and helping them out. So Saturday, back to Saturday, Clint and I were going to try to do a beginning to end, and and we're going to share conversation. And I don't know if you're going to be able to join me. You're going to be able to join me, Clint, because I don't think we'll be fielding a lot of questions. We'll be doing mostly just discussions, but I don't know we'll be talking over each other too. But yeah, we're going to try to just do beginning to end maybe, and go over the tools and again, not something you're going to have. Um, yeah, we're always learning. We're always learning, and we're going to learn something new. Every time I'm here, I learn something new, like the pine soda. Pine kombucha, I guess. Pine tea, fermented pine tea. That's, I guess, a pine needle kombucha. Yeah, now that's why I love. See, used to people would say, "Who you talking to?" I don't. There's, I only see 17 people in here. Who's all these YouTube people you talk? And they don't realize that 17. That's just on one Facebook page. So, um, all right, brother. Yeah. Hey, we appreciate you, Tyler. But yeah, we're going to try to do a beginner thing, kind of maybe delve into a little bit of intermediate, beginner intermediate. But yeah, oh yeah, we get back to our I kept suggest we use a StreamYard to do our podcasting with, and thanks to Phil Billy Moonshine who sponsors us and pays for our StreamYard. So anytime we can, we plug old Phil Billy and the militia and and he's who makes all this possible, right? So definitely, if you want to get some work done, get you. They do a lot. They do a lot for Vever steels, like the football steel I was talking about. They can put you some horse heads on there and all kinds of modifications. The guy was talking about earlier about doing a 3-pot. They specialize in making worms and other stuff for that. So if you're not a do-it-yourselfer, definitely get up with Phil Billy at philbillymoonshine.com and talk to him and Ian. They can hook you up. They got good turn times, so it's not 6 to 9 months to a year getting what you need. So those guys, they straight up honest, do good work. If you live, close to Ohio, you can, drive to them. You can save on shipping, and definitely, helps a lot, especially if you have some larger items. But but anyway, in the StreamYards, people would often wonder who I was talking to, and they wouldn't see. They'd either be on YouTube, not able to see the Facebook comments, or they'd be on Facebook, not able to see the YouTube comments. So every week I would complain to StreamYards, man, it'd be nice if we could post the chat, the comments in the actual field here, in the actual screen that everybody can see. And that way people from all platforms can see, what we're talking about. And I guess they listened and they did it. Now I've also told them that we need it to be bigger. So maybe if we could get a little larger and a little wider, that would be awesome too. So people on their phones could see, and maybe just make it so we could adjust the field that those comments were shown in. But at least it's a big plus, so everybody can see what's being said now. So I definitely appreciate StreamYards for doing that, and they're listening. They're a good company, and one of the few that we can stream multi-platform to. There's a lot of them out there that just kind of, you can stream to this one out, and this one we can stream to Twitch, Kick, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and multiple accounts on it. So it's pretty good for that. So yeah, I'm really glad that they added the comments in the screen for everybody to see. That helps a lot for other viewers. So definitely liking that. So we're gonna tell them, make it bigger. I'll keep on to them, and before long they're gonna be like, damn it, not ever good enough, never good enough. Got to make it bigger. So maybe they'll make us a little digital container that we can just stretch it out to whatever size we want. If they're listening, digital container would work pretty well. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Hit the like and share. If you got some friends that are in the hobby, introduce them to us and bring them in here, and we can answer their questions too, and help you and your buddies get to making better whiskey and just distillates, I should say, not just whiskey. But so be sure to hit that like button and share. If on Wednesdays and Saturdays, if you want to share this to a group that you have that's special, that you go to, that you get a lot of information from, and you're friends with people there, ask them if it's okay, and if it is, you're welcome to share this to any group, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you want to. More people get the message out there, the better, and more people we can bring in here and teach to, the better it is, and we'll all grow together. Then we'll bring more people in with maybe more knowledge that can help educate us on some things. I definitely love to learn, and I've learned a lot with Clint. He's helped me, and Scott both. We're all learning and teaching. So it definitely hurts. It helps, doesn't hurt to have more people in here. And Carpenter seems pretty knowledgeable as well. So definitely a welcome addition to the podcast, and love having you guys in here. And we will see you all Saturday, and we'll talk about mashing in all grain, and then maybe talk about some other things and other equipment and things that you need, and doing some multi-grain maybe. So be a great time for beginners to tune in. So yeah, I will, Clint, for sure. Yeah, I will. I'll get up with you probably tomorrow evening sometime. Till then, see y'all Saturday, 8 Eastern, same time, same bat channel. Love y'all. Peace out. Shine on.